another edition of the Tango Banter. I am Yelizaveta and very happy to have you with me for the next few minutes. Before we launch into our topic today, just wanted to let you know that I am taking the show on the road again. I will be in San Diego this week for the San Diego Tango Marathon. There will be a little workshop before the marathon on Thursday night, August 18th. And I'm teaching this workshop for women who are interested in starting to lead. So if you've been toying around with the idea, if you're planning to be at the marathon, do come by on Thursday night from 7:30 to 9:30. Would love to have you. It's open to women of all levels of experience. So don't feel bad if you don't know any leading moves. Just your curiosity and willingness to try something new is required for this workshop. So I encourage you to drop by. If you want to learn more about it, you can visit my website at imsotango.com. And I've also noticed that my last week's episode really struck a chord with many of you, and I've been getting such wonderful, thoughtful, and thought-provoking messages. And I have to be honest, I am surprised at how many messages I've been getting from men. And I know maybe that's obvious, but when I started the podcast and sort of when I think about my themes, a lot of them I'm thinking about it from a woman's perspective, of course my own, but also because I talk a lot with women. I don't necessarily spend as much time talking with men at the Milonga, and so it's been really great to hear from those of you from the opposite gender, hear how you are relating to the themes I'm talking about, just some of your own experience as well, because I really see this platform, this podcast, as a way to bring forth issues that are on our minds, that we're dealing with on a daily basis, but we don't talk about because maybe it's taboo or we don't really know how to talk about it. And one thing that you'd learn about me if you hung out with me even for a little bit is that I'm a huge fan of Sex and the City. I have rewatched that show several times, including recently. I just finished going through it again. And one of the reasons that this particular show has had such an impact on me, and those of you out there who are fans, you'll probably agree with me, is that that show really brought forth ideas and concepts and issues that were not discussed anywhere else. So I remember as a young woman in my 20s watching that show and listening to some of the dialogue and some of the issues that the characters faced was extremely liberating for me. And I know it made it much easier to speak up and to develop myself into my adult self. So in a similar way with this podcast, I feel my goal is to open up discussion, continue to open up dialogue about issues that are ongoing, things that are not necessarily going to be solved anytime soon, things that might be really frustrating or embarrassing. And in that way, maybe discharge them a little bit and take away some of the sting or discomfort that we might feel towards these ideas. I think that's been very helpful for me, and I'm sort of guessing that's what's helpful for others of you. And some of you have shared this with me, that you're just grateful that that I'm articulating things that you might be thinking, but no, you haven't had a chance to talk about. So all of that is to say, keep it coming, because all of your input and your stories is what fuels my next ideas. And I want the discussion to be relevant. So it really helps to know what your experience has been, because no matter how well informed I might be for myself, my perspective is only so wide. So it's sometimes great to hear from those of you who have different experiences and different ideas, how you perceive these issues. So today's topic is going to be a good one for us to dig into. And it's a topic that's on my mind a lot. I have written about it over the years. I've talked about it at length. I haven't talked about it directly on this podcast, although I keep referring to it. And so with a little bit of trepidation, I'll go ahead and open it up, fully knowing that I don't really know yet what it is I want to say fully, because the topic is huge. So the topic of rejection, saying no to someone. And because we're talking about tango, we're going to keep it to the dance floor. But of course, it's not hard to connect all of these themes to our daily life. So when it comes to rejection, tango can be pretty brutal, and there's a lot of anxiety that comes out in people. And in my own experience, the experience of rejection and my willingness to experience it and how I react a lot of times is the truest form of reflecting on where I am emotionally. It's like I can feel really confident, really great about myself, but it is what happens to me internally when I'm rejected, or when I have to reject someone else. That's the true test of where I'm at, because it's not easy, right? And for most of us, when we start tango, we are very concerned with getting invited, with being accepted, and we fear rejection. So, I've heard of people saying that they've tried to capaseo someone and that person said no, and they never asked them again. And I've done that myself. Like you go out on a limb and you ask someone and they say no, and then you're like, I'm never going to ask them again, right? Like that's happened. It's also happened that when I first started dancing, I would get a lot of dances from people who had been in the community for a long time, but who were not necessarily advanced dancers, right? There's a very common progression in the dance, in a dance path for someone, that they get to a certain level and then they don't progress anymore. And we might discuss whether that's wrong or right and whether they should be progressing, but ultimately there's a whole segment of tango population that they get to a certain level and then they just stay there. And so as a beginner, when I started, I was dancing with a lot of those dancers, and then I progressed, and it got to be that I didn't want to dance with those dancers anymore. And I started rejecting them. And boy, did I feel uncomfortable about that, right? I'm sure this is something that's on people's minds a lot. In fact, I just had a conversation with a student of mine who I was asking her how her milonga experience was, and she shared, it was good, but I ended up having to dance with a couple of people that I really didn't want to. And so we talked a little bit about that, and we, especially I think women, and I mean, this is my assumption. It's a well-informed assumption, but it's still an assumption that for women, especially, for us to say no to someone is almost more difficult than sustaining a rejection, being rejected sometimes. There's so much guilt associated with it, especially if we are sort of trained to seek approval from others, and a lot of our identity is derived from that. So then we really rely on people asking us to dance to feel good about ourselves, and that's just kind of how it works. And I know that for me, that was very much the case when I first started. Is that this nervousness? You're going to go to the milonga, and I talked about in the last episode how I used to have panic attacks, right? And a lot of the panic attacks were coming from this thought like, nobody's going to dance with me. Nobody's going to dance. I mean, I was so scared. And it's funny because I remember my very first festival where I had a pretty big moment of panic was in Istanbul. It's a huge festival. The guest dancers were Chicho and Juana, who are legends, of course, and attracted a huge crowd. And it's my first festival, and I was so stressed out, of course, because I'm super insecure. I don't know the language. There's all these people. I feel really awkward. I was also in this sort of interesting style phase at that point. I had this extremely short black hair with these very severe bangs that kind of cut across my forehead. My inspiration was Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So I was in this black phase. I wore a lot of black eyeliner, black hair. And then in terms of my clothing, I wore a lot of asymmetrical things. I liked kind of flowy, asymmetrical, not form-fitting clothing. So that's kind of how I was. And I can imagine going into a traditional tango milonga looking like that. I'm sure I came across as, being kind of awkward, and maybe not being very approachable. Also because I was very anxious, and I wanted to hide. I wanted to hide in the corner, but then you go in the corner and you're like, nobody's going to dance with me. Nobody's going to dance with me. But then you're like, okay, you need to go up and be visible. So I remember I go to this wall at one point, and I'm standing there and I'm just sweating bullets, and I'm convinced that everybody's looking at me. And so there's a lot of anxiety about that, right? That you're going to be rejected. Nobody's going to ask you to dance. And that's a huge hurdle, right? That's a huge feeling to experience. Now, granted, eventually that feeling is kind of not as powerful, because as you start dancing, you get kind of less and less anxious about it. And for a lot of people like myself, eventually it was too much dancing. Once I got over that initial hurdle, I've had some experiences under my belt. I was going to milongas more. I changed the way I dressed. That helped a lot. I should do an episode just on that, because what you wear does impact you for sure. It's huge. Fashion is another aspect of tango that's very under evaluated. So eventually it became too much. And I remember when I went to Buenos Aires, there was a turning point when I was at a milonga where there were so many dancers and so many foreigners, and they all were just looking for someone to dance with. Like there was no curation. There was no like, do I really want to dance with this person or not? It was just like, music is on. I got to find a body to dance with. And so I kind of reached a point where I started saying no. And it was interesting because here I was still a new dancer and I want to dance, but now I have this feeling like I don't want to just dance with anyone. I want to dance with a good dancer. And the moment that starts happening in your mind, that means you now are on that path to saying no to someone or wanting to say no. And whether you do or not, that is becomes the dialogue, because for women, we feel very guilty saying no. We feel very guilty rejecting. We feel responsible. We don't want to hurt people's feelings a lot of times. So the conversation I had with the dancer a few days ago, when she said, I had to dance with somebody I didn't want to. And I said, why? And she said, because they were my friends. They were some acquaintances. And, I was like, how do you say no to that? And of course, like that never gets resolved, but I think it's good to keep it as an open dialogue, because sometimes it's good to practice saying no, and other times it's good to say yes. And it's just going to depend on your situation. There it becomes an exploration of your own values, your own willingness, maybe even your own self-respect, right? Like, will you say yes to a tanda because you feel guilty saying no? And is that acceptable for you? Are you gonna do that a lot versus saying no and allowing for the possibility of something better? Right? I mean, it's definitely kind of a yin-yang pull. You're always kind of between the two. But I like the idea, and this, I also had another conversation with a friend, a true Tango Banter. I had a true Tango Banter at the Malanga a few weeks ago with a really good friend. We found ourselves sitting late in the night not dancing, and we started talking about this idea that we've gotten to this place where it's okay not to dance. We'd rather just sit and listen rather than grab just anyone to dance with. And we were talking about the fact that every time we do go to dance, we always have this idea of like community service tandas, right? Like there are those dancers that you want to dance with as a contribution to their growth, right? There might be beginners, they might be one of those dancers who are kind of like plateaued and they haven't developed, and you just want to give and be generous and share and dance with those people, because for them, it's such a treat to dance with you. Whenever sometimes I'll dance with somebody who doesn't get to dance very much with a dancer of my level, and they'll be so grateful and they'll be so happy, and it just like makes their night. And it's really good to do that for someone, to give that. But how much can you do that, right? Like for me, I would say 2 tandas a night is about my limit, because you want to respect your own dance. You want to respect your body. Sometimes if it's uncomfortable for you to dance with someone, how much of your own comfort are you going to sacrifice, right? So depending on your level of stamina and allowing this kind of like, service, at some point you're going to have to confront the possibility that you might have to say no. And so where is that line? Where is that line for you, right? Where is that? where are you comfortable at, and where do you feel that you're getting what you want? Because when you say yes to a dance that you don't quite want, it's kind of like you're not really giving the other person what they want, even though they're getting to dance with you, yes, but it's like energetically you're like not really in it. And then you're also closing yourself off to other dancers for yourself, right? Like you're not available to dance with the dancers that you really want. And of course, it gets into that level of like believing whether you can get what you want. And I do want to do another episode just on like, if you have an ambition to dance with higher level dancers, which I know all of us do, I still do, every single dancer wants to dance with higher level dancers. And I think for most of us, we think it's just a matter of technique and talent and experience, right? We just think like, as a follower, I used to think, well, as soon as I get my balance right, my pivot's good, then everybody's going to want to dance with me. But that's not the case. There's actually, strategies and I think some savviness required socially to get to that level where you have access to the dancers that you want. So I do want to do an episode on that for sure. But today I just kind of wanted to bring this question of what is the line for you to draw when you say no. What are your deal breakers? What are your personal deal breakers when it comes to dancing? And I'll go ahead and open up about my deal breakers. And it's the reason why I'm doing it again is I think you'll be surprised at some of my deal breakers, and maybe you'll be even shocked that I base my decision on certain qualities. But before I share them, I'll tell you why I decided to come up with this for myself. And a couple of things happened along my tango journey, and I think it really opened up my eyes about what are deal breakers for men and what are deal breakers for women. And of course they're going to be different because in tango, men, leaders, are the ones initiating. We're women followers are the ones who are answering the call, right? So when you initiate, it kind of works backwards. You reject first, right? You choose the person that you want to dance with as a leader. So for men, they reject by choosing one over the other. For us women, we have to kind of say no to that and then wait for the thing that we want or pursue with the person that we really want to dance with. So there's been a lot of interest I've noticed over the years, especially like when I first was dancing, there was a lot of conversation about how do you choose who you dance with? And this question was asked a lot of professional dancers. And I noticed it was this yearning to know, what do we need to do to get a dance with you, right? Like this question of, what do we need to make sure that we do to get a yes, right? And so I'll tell you a couple of things that happened that were really revealing. One was an interview I watched with a very high level, currently celebrity status dancer leader, who is not one of my favorites. I don't really, I think he's a very gifted dancer, but I don't really care for his style. And he was interviewed. When I tell you what he said, I wonder if you'll guess who it is. So he was asked how he decides who he's going to dance with. And he said that his criteria was that the woman had to have certain features. She had to be young. She had to be beautiful. I'm paraphrasing here. But the other thing is that she had to wear a different dress from the night before. So like if it was a festival, if he saw a woman and she like wore the same dress as the night before, he wouldn't dance with her. And when he said that, my first reaction was like, what an ass. But the thing was that he got to say it, and the people who were listening, they didn't protest. They just took it as like, oh yeah, okay, that's his taste. That's what he likes, and that's what he wants. And that was kind of a clue to me. I'm like, this guy openly says that he only wants to dance with young, hot women, and, you know, they have to be dressed a certain way. And like, it's a total judgment of external features. It's very facade. And tango is supposed to be about the embrace and intimacy and all that. And here's this person just being very open about something that might make other people feel very uncomfortable even saying. Like, as a woman, I couldn't imagine saying something like that. It felt very rude, you know? And then another occasion that helped me form these deal breakers is I was at a milonga with a friend in Buenos Aires, and he went to dance with someone, started a tanda, and he returned within like half a song. And I said, what happened? And he said, oh, I just walked off the dance floor because her embrace was so uncomfortable. And I was like, you mean to tell me you just walked off the dance floor in the middle of a song? And he was so not unapologetic about it. He was like, of course. I just told her that her embrace was impossible, and I couldn't dance with that, and I just walked off. Light bulb moment. I was like, wow, that's amazing that like you felt you were uncomfortable, you didn't like something, and you just walked off, and you kind of decided that. So at that moment, I kind of decided that it was okay for me to form my own set of deal breakers. That it's kind of arbitrary. It doesn't matter what kind of deal breakers they are. They're mine. Like, and I can be okay with that. So I kind of started keeping track for myself of what kinds of things really bother me that will really prevent me from wanting to dance with someone. So here's a small little list that has been kind of a standard for me that I choose. How I choose the people I dance with. All right, here we go. I'm going to lead with a really intimate one, and that is number one for me is smell. Smell. It's if I don't like the way somebody smells, I cannot dance with them. And it might be BO. Like, some people's BO just really doesn't smell good to me. It might be really big kind of opulent cologne or perfume that is like, but it might even just be something about our chemistry. Like when I have a good friend who I've danced with, and when she, you know, starts sweating a little bit, she kind of smells like urine, and it's so weird, and nobody else smells it. I swear to God, I've asked other people, nobody else smells it. I'm the only one, you know? So it kind of goes to show, it's like chemistry. Sometimes somebody smells like to you, it's not like they actually smell bad, it's just to you. And for me, deal breaker, okay? It's just, it doesn't work. Another one is like hair. And I know I have quite a bit of hair, so, you know, sometimes I know people don't like my hair, and that's okay. But for some people, whether it's like height, some people I dance with, they might be slightly shorter than me, and they might have really prickly hair or something, and it's like in my face, and I feel like I'm dancing with a hedgehog. Like, I can't do it, you know? So I'll make a decision based on that. Like, I don't like it. Another one is whenever I watch people dance, if I see dancers moving a lot around the dance floor, like huge steps, moving around a lot, going in and out of um, lanes, dance lanes. Like to me, if I see that, I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. Just right away, if I see that, I can't, I don't like seeing that, you know. Another one has become drunk. If somebody's drunk, and I can tell, there's a number of dancers who are very fine dancers, and I always try to catch them at the beginning of the night because towards the end of the night they get kind of drunk and kind of sweaty, which is the next one actually, the sweat. And maybe I've become a little bit more sensitive post COVID, that might be, but I really don't like dancing with men or women who are very very sweaty. So if I see that, if like somebody's drenched, and I might love dancing with them typically, but I am not, not gonna do it. Um, Another one is like, I guess that also has to do with smell. Is like breath smell. Really, if the breath smells bad, it's like I can't do it. I can't do it. I kind of have to dance with my face kind of turned away because I can't focus on the music. I'm like trying not to gag or something. um, it's like it's very physical because you're like so close. So that's a big one. Um, so the other couple of ones are definitely very subjective, and that's a lot of times the embrace, the quality of the embrace. That's a big, big topic. And of course, if we talk about rejecting a dancer, a lot of times we'll start there, which is like the embrace is uncomfortable. And it's very likely that it's not uncomfortable at itself, it's just uncomfortable to me. So we sometimes get lost in like judging ourselves that we can't make it work with another person. But you kind of develop an intuition about that. I know I did. It took a while, but I kind of had this gut instinct that I would watch a dancer and I'll just be able to tell whether their embrace was going to work for me. And one time I didn't listen to this guidance in myself. I was at a milonga in Buenos Aires, and a woman sitting next to me who was a very advanced dancer and teacher, she was famous to me, and I was like honored to be sitting next to her and talking to her. She agreed to dance with this gentleman who I was like, why would she agree to dance with him? He doesn't look that good. And so the next night I saw him in a milonga, and I thought, well, she danced with him. If she can dance with him, that means it's a good sign, so I'll dance with him. And I tell you, I took the embrace, and the moment we took the embrace, I was like, wow, this is going to be a long ride. So I learned my lesson. And now I kind of watch for certain things in the embrace. I observe the posture a lot. If I see somebody dancing with their head forward quite a bit, I will choose not to dance with them because pressure of the head forward is one of the biggest contributors of neck and shoulder tension for me. It really impacts my balance and my experience. So, I'll typically either will kind of reject a cabeceo, or I just will opt for dancing an open embrace or something. So that's a really big one. And then the last one, definitely, any dancer who starts giving you any kind of feedback. Like I've danced with men who like correct my dance in some way or give me some sort of comment about my dancing, and to me that's a no-no. Absolutely no. I would say if that happens. Even, recently I danced with somebody who, they didn't mean anything by it, but even like they kind of had this thing where they would just kind of take my body with both of their hands and kind of place me in a certain way alongside them, and they don't mean anything by it. There's nothing. I don't think they see it as anything offensive. They're not aware of it, but I don't like it. I don't like it, and I don't know whether I'm responsible for bringing that up with them and asking them not to do that. Like, sure, I could, but also I kind of don't want to do that either. I'm sort of thinking to myself, like my friend who just was like, "Hey, I don't like this. I'm just going to walk off the floor," and they took that space and they took that. They took up that room, with their will, and they're like, "This is what I want, and this is what I don't want." And sometimes I have these situations where, I could say something and bring it up and ask for something different, but honestly, I don't really like doing that, and it doesn't really work. One of the last times I had to do it, I was dancing with somebody, and their embrace was so uncomfortable, like so much tension in their open side of the embrace, and I asked them, to do something different, and it really wasn't met with a lot of warmth or care. Instead, it was just kind of like, you're being such a diva. So anyway, that's kind of the beginning of my list. I am curious what you have on your list as deal breakers. Some of these items were topics that we discussed with my friend at our real Tango Banter at the Malanga. We brought up a lot of these things about smell and how the person feels, and sometimes it's the clothing, sometimes, it's like these superficial things. And I think a real deal breaker has qualities to it. So when I ask you, like, what are your deal breakers, I want you to think of things that feel very quirky and individual to you. It's just this quirk that only you have. Like, one of my best friends has this thing about teeth. Like, she cannot date with a person who doesn't have like the specific criteria for teeth, and she's felt very guilty about that, because she's like, well, he has all these amazing other things, right? But I'm like, you know what? This is your deal breaker. Respect it. Because if we can't respect that, and we let that we're kind of like, oh, we'll allow this, but then we'll keep doing that, and eventually we're like saying yes to a lot of things we don't want, So it's got to be really individual and personal. Secondly, it's irrational. Okay, it's an irrational thing. There's no good reason for you to do that, and you might even judge someone who does it. You might even like have a bad opinion if you see it, but it's an irrational kind of thought that you can't allow yourself to do this because of this thing that's kind of doesn't make sense. And frequently it's embarrassing to admit to. It's embarrassing to admit that you won't dance with someone just because they have a certain smell about them or their particular height. Like, some people are like, I'm never going to dance with people taller than me. That's just it. Can't do it. There is a dancer that I don't dance with because he's too tall for me. There is. And he's an amazing dancer, but I don't dance in heels, and he's very, very tall, and I just don't dance with him. So that's like my deal breaker, I got to be comfortable. So I am curious to hear what your deal breakers are. Pop them into a message, send them on social media at I'm So Tango. And this turned out to be a pretty fun little discussion. I like where this is going, and we'll continue bantering next week at another episode. So I hope to see you this weekend at San Diego Tango Marathon. come by, say hello. I always love meeting the people who are listening to this, and love bantering with you in person. Until next time, have a great week. Ciao.